We set up our drums like Ginger Baker in the 1960s after watching her play. All our tom-toms were sideways. Each of us had two bass drums. A band known for long beards and gritty Texas style, Frank Beard was the only one without one. Don't be fooled by its simplicity. He's driven ZZ Top's sound for almost 50 years. Among America's most enduring and distinctive rock bands, Frank doesn't seek fame. Not using popularity to brand himself, he rarely conducts extended interviews. However, every solid drum beat in the grunge, sharp-dressed man, or tush features him. Just the basics, but crucial. Frank Beard's life is unusual and amazing. From drumming in Texas bar bands to sold-out international tours, from severe drug addiction to a symbol of survival and rehabilitation, from hiding behind his drum equipment to becoming a legendary band member. How did Frank Beard survive in a music industry when celebrity can destroy everything? Not just a drum narrative. This is about a man who chose silence yet never quit playing. Early life. Frank Lee Beard was born on June 11, 1949, in Frankston, Texas, to a middle-class American family in the suburbs. Life moved slowly, yet enough to instill a love of rhythm and sound in a young lad. No artistic background or money distinguished the Beard family. They supported their son in any sincere and hardworking desire. Frank attended steady schools. He attended Irving High School in Irving, Texas, a rapidly developing town after World War II. Despite his average grades, Frank became renowned by teachers and friends for his calm, persistent nature, especially when discussing music. His love for drums began when he tapped his palms to family radio music as a child. Students said he tried rhythms with everything from school desks to tin cans. Frank loved tempo and beat, unlike other boys his age who liked vehicles and sports. Not just a fleeting interest. It gradually became his most important youth activity. Frank started performing in local bands in high school. He played drums for the Cellar Dwellers, Hustlers, Warlocks, and American Blues, where he met Dusty Hill, his long-standing musical partner and ZZ Top co-founder. Small pubs, underground clubs, and garages in Texas towns were their original venues. Locations with a few dozen people but a passion matching any huge stage. Frank Beard's childhood was stable, but his love of percussion, his steady rhythm, and those early, rough-around-the-edges gigs quietly prepared him for a long journey that would make him an indispensable part of one of America's most iconic bands. Early career Frank Beard went from local drummer to professional musician in the late 1960s. After playing with the Warlocks and American Blues, he sought more serious prospects in Texas's developing music scene. Frank and Dusty Hill joined the Zombies, a bizarre and controversial band. Imitating the renowned British band, despite not having original band members, they toured the U.S. under that name. They subsequently realized this was naive and embarrassing, but it taught Frank how to perform under pressure and improve his stage talents. After this, a crucial meeting changed everything. Billy Gibbons, fresh from the moving sidewalks, needed a drummer for his new band in 1969. Frank Beard, Gibbons' mutual friend, suggested Dusty Hill as bassist. That established ZZ Top's original lineup: Billy Gibbons on guitar and vocals, Dusty Hill on bass, and Frank Beard on drums, on ale. Later that year in Texas, ZZ Top debuted on stage. The youngest member of the group was Frank, 20. His function was to anchor the band's rhythm. He immediately established the band's musical experiments using his nightclub and unofficial tour experience. Early on, Frank wasn't only the drummer. He helped create the band's blues, boogie, and hard rock sound, a sound that would become ZZ Top. ZZ Top's 1971 first album began Beard and the band's six-decade musical career. Frank Beard, who rarely spoke publicly, established one thing early on. Though he wasn't at the microphone, he kept time behind the machine. That steady pulse helped ZZ Top survive their darkest years and become an American rock icon. Career success: when Frank Beard and ZZ Top released their debut album in 1971, no one could have imagined that this three-man Texas band would become one of American rock's most lasting icons. ZZ Top's raw blues rock style, infused with Southern flair, and Frank's precise drumming were not well known at the time. The group's quietest member was constantly behind the rhythm. They became successful with their 1973 third album, Tres Hombres. Hit song La Grange got them on national radio outside Texas. A repetitious theme and simplistic lyrics made the song simple, but Frank's drumming was tight, stable, and hypnotic. Held everything together. ZZ Top became regarded as a quirky band with a unique sound and a group who could make people bang their heads with every rhythm with the garage. Beard was important to the band's extended U.S. tours in the years that followed. Gibbons and Hill added effects and guitar solos, while Beard stayed true to his part. Rock-solid foundation. He was special because he avoided flashy tactics. Frank drummed like a Texan traveling through the desert. No hurry, no veering, dead-on accuracy. That stability let the band experiment without compromising their individuality. ZZ Top became global superstars in the 1980s. The band added synthesizers, MTV-ready visuals, and younger targeted tunes with Eliminator, 1983. Many older rock bands struggled to modernize, but ZZ Top did so effortlessly and successfully. Frank was the first to recognize MTV's explosive potential. He called Gibbons and said, "This station plays music videos continually. You should turn it on." That call brought ZZ Top into the world of music television. Videos like Sharp Dressed Man, Legs, and Gimme All Your Lovin', featuring classic coupes, flashy girls, and two long-bearded men moving in slow motion under neon lights, became iconic. And Frank? He was the only one without a long beard. But he was also the only one who didn't have to change a thing, because his rhythm was already perfect. Eliminator sold over 10 million copies in the US alone and made ZZ Top one of the best-selling rock bands on the planet. Follow-up albums like Afterburner, 1985, and Recycler, 1990, continued the momentum, accompanied by global tours. Frank never missed a show. Despite the toll of past substance abuse, he showed up, sat behind his kid, and kept time like a watchful soldier amid a storm of sound. ZZ Top's success wasn't just commercial, they became a blueprint for a kind of rock with personality, music that didn't try to be overly complex or take itself too seriously, and within that style, Frank Beard's steady, unshowy drumming was the backbone. In 2004, when the band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Frank didn't say much. But his presence from the very first album to the height of their glory said more than any thank you speech could. Fans may not remember his name first, but anyone who has ever listened to a ZZ Top song has heard Frank Beard, whether they realized it or not. Crisis and Tragedy, the massive success of ZZ Top in the 1970s and early 1980s brought more than just fame and fortune. It also came with the hidden temptations that often lurk behind the spotlight. For Frank Beard, the quiet figure in the background who rarely drew media attention, that isolation, coupled with the relentless rhythm of touring, paved the way for a long descent into darkness. In 1977, ZZ Top embarked on one of the biggest tours of their career up to that point. Each member earned about $72,000, an enormous amount for a rock artist at the time. But in a rare interview, Frank later admitted, "I blew every cent of it on drugs, not a penny left. It started with LSD, then cocaine, but it didn't stop there." Frank turned to heroin, which he once called a vacation for the mind. Drugs became his constant companion in the studio, backstage, in hotel rooms, and on the tour bus. Didn't lose his technical ability, but he began losing himself. Fans had no idea, but within the band, things were getting tense. Beard became erratic, easily unhinged, and would often go missing before shows. Recording sessions dragged on twice as long as scheduled. There were times he'd fall asleep right in the rehearsal room, even as guitars wailed around him. Eventually, the road led to a 12-step recovery program, where Frank had to make a choice, either get clean or walk away from everything he had built with ZZ Top. By late 1979, the band quietly announced an indefinite hiatus. No official reason was given, but the truth was that Frank had entered rehab. The next 3 years would become one of the quietest periods in ZZ Top's history, and the darkest for Frank Beard personally. He disappeared from the public eye. No new music was released, and he severed all ties with the music world. But in that silence, a rebirth began. Frank committed himself step by step to getting clean, not just to save his career, but to save his life. After leaving rehab, he began regular therapy, focused on his health, and returned to drumming from scratch, as if he'd never known fame. In 1981, ZZ Top reemerged. When Eliminator was released 2 years later, many assumed the band had simply updated their image and sound to keep up with the times. But behind that reinvention was a deeper truth. Frank Beard had survived. And he didn't just return. He reclaimed his place, continuing to drum on every album, every tour, and every live performance for the next 4 decades. Not every artist can make it back from heavy addiction and stand under the stage lights without losing who they are. But Frank Beard did, not with declarations or applause-seeking. He did it by keeping the beat, silent, steady, and precise, as if nothing had ever broken. Personal life. Amid constant touring, stage lights, and commercial success, Frank Beard chose a quiet and private life. Almost entirely opposite to the image most people associate with a rock musician. He was first married in the late 1970s, but that marriage ended quietly and received little media attention. It wasn't until 1982, just after completing rehab and preparing for his return to ZZ Top, that Frank remarried, this time to Debbie Meredith, a woman from outside the entertainment industry. When Frank met Debbie, he was at one of the lowest points in his life, fresh out of rehab, struggling to find his footing in music again, and still dealing with the emotional fallout of addiction. Everything was uncertain then, his career, his health, even his state of mind. But Debbie, unaffected by fame, grounded and steady, entered his life with a calmness and resilience that proved vital. They married in 1982, just before ZZ Top entered its most commercially successful era with Eliminator, 1983. It wasn't a high-profile wedding splashed across music magazines, nor did it come with glamorous photo shoots. But for Frank, it was a new beginning. The first time he had a partner who didn't ask about tour dates or parties, but instead cared about what he ate, whether he'd slept well, and how he was really feeling that day. Frank and Debbie had 3 children together. During the band's global tours, he made a conscious choice to stay detached from the entertainment world whenever he was off stage. The family lived on a spacious ranch in Richmond, Texas, where Frank spent most of his time tending to the land, playing golf, and caring for pets. With his children, he placed no pressure or expectations to follow in his musical footsteps. He only wanted to give them what he never had growing up: stability and a constant family presence. Unlike his more public-facing bandmates Billy Gibbons and Dusty Hill, who often appeared on TV shows, at fashion events, and in media interviews, Frank Beard never chased publicity. He didn't write memoirs, produce documentaries, or give long interviews. The few insights into his personal life usually came secondhand, from relatives or brief mentions in articles about ZZ Top. Notably, he was the only member of the group who didn't grow a long beard, a detail often brought up jokingly by fans, but which also accurately reflected Frank's personality. He went against the trend when it didn't feel right and never needed outward symbols to prove who he was. In 2002, during a tour in Paris, Frank was suddenly struck with acute appendicitis and had to undergo emergency surgery. It was one of the rare occasions when he missed a show, and he was temporarily replaced by John Douglas, his longtime drum technician. After the operation, Frank returned to the band within weeks as if nothing had happened. It was a small incident, but it reinforced his image as the quiet, irreplaceable force behind the scenes. Throughout more than 50 years of performing, he's never been publicly involved in conflicts with colleagues, never embroiled in moral scandals, and never considered a source of instability within the band. In an industry marked by chaos, Frank's quiet endurance may be the rarest quality a rock musician can maintain. Frank Beard doesn't live to be seen, he lives to keep playing. And within that silence lies a whole world of family discipline and deliberate choices, the kind of world that many others in the spotlight lost long ago. Legacy and influence. Frank Beard is not the kind of drummer who appears on magazine covers, nor does he often make the list of technical legends debated among drum enthusiasts. But one truth is undeniable. Without Frank Beard, ZZ Top wouldn't have lasted beyond a single album. For over 50 years, he has been the only member who never left the band, not even briefly. On every recording, every tour, every music video, Frank was there. Never loud, never stealing the spotlight, but always the one keeping time for everything else. Frank didn't play drums to perform. He played to serve the band. His drumming wasn't about speed or flashy technique. It was about stability, adaptability, and a perfect match with ZZ Top's musical identity. A gritty, blues-infused rock that didn't need to flex to be compelling. He knew exactly what was necessary and what was excessive. For each song, his style, focusing on groove rather than showmanship, influenced an entire generation of Southern rock drummers. Many younger musicians have credited Beard with teaching them how to play for the band, not for the ego. In an era when American rock often favored explosive solos, Frank stood as proof of the power of restraint. His legacy is also inseparable from ZZ Top as a cultural phenomenon. From their breakout era with Tres Hombres through the MTV boom of Eliminator and into the years following Dusty Hill's death, Frank has always symbolized continuity. He is the thread connecting generations of fans, the same man who played for bell-bottom crowds in 1974 and later kept the beat for audiences wearing Sharp-Dressed Man t-shirts in 2019. In 2004, when ZZ Top was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Frank stood beside Gibbons and Hill in a legendary frame. He didn't give a long speech. He didn't try to be inspirational, but everyone understood. If those two were the face and voice of ZZ Top, Frank was the heart keeping everything from falling apart. In an industry where egos often lead to breakups, lawsuits, or lineup changes, Frank Beard proved something simple yet valuable. Endurance and loyalty are also forms of legacy, and in his case, it's a legacy that will never be forgotten. Current life. At 75, Frank Beard is no longer the young drummer from the dusty stages of Texas, but he remains an inseparable part of ZZ Top, the band he helped build, kept in rhythm, and stood beside for more than half a century. In early 2024, Frank joined ZZ Top on a co-headlining tour with Leonard Skinner called Sharp Dressed Simple Man. The tour lasted over a year, and despite his age, Beard showed up for every performance without missing a single show. He no longer moved with the agility of his younger years, but his drumming remained solid and precise, as if time hadn't touched it. However, in early 2025, ZZ Top unexpectedly announced that Frank would temporarily step away from the Elevation Tour due to medical reasons. Initial reports stated he needed a procedure on his leg, possibly related to the ankle or ligaments, but no official statement was released by Frank himself. Drum technician John Douglas, who had previously filled in during emergencies, was brought in for the spring tour dates. Frank's absence, even for just 2 months, raised concern among fans. In over 50 years, he had never left the band for health reasons. But by late May 2025, Frank Beard returned to the stage as if he had never left. With his familiar, quiet demeanor, focused eyes behind the drum kit, he offered just one brief sentence to the audience. "It's good to be back. See you out there." It wasn't a declaration. It was a message. He was still here, still keeping time, and still didn't need many words to prove his presence. Offstage, Frank continues to live with his wife Debbie on their ranch in Richmond, Texas, the same place he chose as a refuge during his recovery from addiction in the 1980s and now a peaceful sanctuary in his later years. He has no social media, makes no public statements, and doesn't attend entertainment events. All connections to the outside world are kept to a minimum, just as he has lived his entire career, quietly with discipline and unwavering focus. What's remarkable is that, even with fewer appearances, Frank remains a full member and living symbol of ZZ Top. Those who saw him perform La Grange in 1973 could still watch him play Sharp-Dressed Man in 2025, with the same unshowy yet strangely unshakable rhythm. In an industry where everything moves fast, from musical trends to artists' life cycles, Frank Beard represents something rare: endurance and loyalty to one's core role. Not everyone survives long in rock. Even fewer do so without losing their identity. At 76, Frank has no need to reinvent himself, because what he has done in silence is still echoing on stage every night. Frank Beard's story isn't one of reaching for the spotlight. It's a story of preservation, of keeping time, keeping stability, and keeping the identity of a band intact for over half a century. He never needed flashy titles, nor did he seek the center of the stage. But it's precisely that quiet endurance, that refusal to leave his post, that makes Frank Beard an irreplaceable part of American rock history. If you believe that artists like Frank Beard, silent yet essential, deserve to be remembered and appreciated, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next stories. When was the last time you saw ZZ Top live? What's the one song where you remember Frank's beat the most? Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes a single familiar drum hit is enough to bring back an entire era. See you in the next videos, where we keep telling the stories of those who weren't loud but helped shape the sound of a generation.